But the flip side is you have to prove how that's going to improve the lives of the people you're serving, you're servicing.
All of this leads towards, effectively, we're all servants, we're all worshipping the banking sector. Everything from the minute you arrive in school, you're being told, be a robot and the banking sector will look after everything else.
We look at inflation and we say, well, we got inflation which is crushing people. And we then say, the conventional economic answer is increase interest rates. What does that do? It imposes more suffering because they can't even pay their mortgage.
Is our education system failing our young people? Are they being encouraged to not innovate and to not think about society? And is that something that is making the world a less good place for us all to live in? Well, that's the question we'll be asking on the Manna journey tonight. As ever, Phillip Ullmann is here, but also Richard Gerver, who is an educational expert and former head teacher.
The Manna journey is the catalyst for change in our world. It's a consistent source of truth for the next generation and current leaders. Our mission is to change the world by reframing our current governance, by using ancient wisdom to solve modern problems, and by shaping innovative new businesses to have a culture of pursuit of purpose.
I don't want to sound very, very negative here, but once again, what Philip's railing against, and it comes up time and time again, is the way that everything has been turned into a financial asset.
Yeah.
The way we're all obsessed with banking. That's the only thing of any interest. The people that control all of these new technologies coming to market are people who are interested purely in finance, purely in venture capital, purely in accounting, and it's just not the real world. And I feel it's holding us back.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. You know, and it goes back to what you've just said, what I was talking about, kids under 5, right? Just to give you an example, so I was privileged enough to lead a school in Long Eaton, which for those people that don't know is in the UK, right in the middle of the UK, between two cities, Derby and Nottingham.
It's not exactly a throbbing metropolis.
No, I have to be honest, it is not. The reason nobody listening or watching us will have heard of it before is not by accident. But it's an amazing place, right? Filled with extraordinary people and extraordinary kids who often are the ones who go untapped. The potential is unseen. They're kind of floated over between London and Manchester or Birmingham, right? These are remarkable kids. And we were a primary school. So we had kids from 5 to 11 years of age, right? And what we did was part of our curriculum was designed about them running their own society.
Yes.
So when I tell you that we had 5 to 11-year-olds running a television station, a radio studio,
Brilliant.
shops, cafes, museums, the whole lot. And what we did was we got experts from those fields in to teach the children what those businesses and services look like. So it wasn't teachers trying desperately to understand. It was real experts, because of course what that does is create a level of aspiration for kids who live in a culture, a community with limited aspiration anyway, right? And then we said to them, right, go and make those ideas work, guys. And by the way, we've got a social capital, a pot of funds, right? Yeah. So if you, in your enterprise, let's say you're running the TV studio, you've got an idea, you go to the kids that run the social capital fund, you have to pitch to them how much you need, why you need it, so that part of a business plan. But the flip side is you have to prove how that's going to improve the lives of the people you're serving, you're servicing, right? These were kids between 5 and 11
What's
years
interesting
old.
there as well, and there's loads of interesting stuff in it, the profit that you're talking about is societal benefit.
Exactly.
It's not a financial profit.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that you're very interested in.
And that's really idolatry. What I mean idolatry, if you're worshipping money, and money is your end game, you're worshipping the intermediary. We need money to make the system work. And I think we should get on to the discussion of money. But if it's the end game, which it is in venture capital, which it is in the world of business, you're actually missing what it's really about, which is looking after the people, transforming people's lives, and looking after the planet. But we miss it because we're focused on this intermediary,
but that's why,
which is money.
But Philip, that's why idolatry is so criticised in the Bible. Very simple reason. Because in order to create people who are robotic slaves, they have to worship something worthless.
Yes.
And of course, we've created this system of money in order... And the reason why idolatry, I would suggest, is so prohibited is because it's a distraction from what's important in life.
And it ties into what you said, Richard, at the beginning, that they don't really want people to understand money. Money is right at the heart of everything. And in order to make the system work, don't want us to understand money, which leads us nicely into understanding what actually is money. Because what I'd like to do, Richard, is to start to use your skills to help to educate people so they do start to understand what money is. But let me start by asking you a question, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. How do you think banks work, Richard?
No,
Andre?
I'll tell you what,
Let me ask you.
I can give the answer that 99% of people watching will answer, and I'm their representative in the room. What they think happens is that you take your £10 down to a bank, you put it in the bank, and then that bank loans that out to people with mortgages. And then they have a certain amount of cash in the bank because people might want to take some of their savings out. Not all the savings are in the bank at any one time because they've been loaned out to people. I would suggest that's what most people think a bank does.
Richard,
I would suggest most people think that it's where your money is safe. It's kept safe.
Yes.
It's safe. It's a piggy bank. It's a deposit. Now, let me tell you the truth. Let me bust the myth. Banks lend money into existence. So the money that you describe is the perception of coins or silver or gold put into a piggy bank and deposited in a bank which safeguards it. That is all propaganda. That's all language that's used to actually not tell us what's really going on, which is the money is literally loaned into existence.
What does that mean?
So that means is...
So I get a £10,000 loan and the £10,000 doesn't exist. The bank just says, create £10,000 and credits it to my account.
Absolutely. So the bank says, and we give them this carte blanche to do whatever they want with it. But yeah, they actually say, there's £10,000, you owe it to me. And that is money. That's the money.
But hang on a second, Philip. What happens when I pay the £10,000 back?
The money goes.
It disappears.
It disappears. This is the crazy... Yes, you didn't know that, Richard. Yes,
No.
The money... This is crazy, but it does. Because the money is loaned into existence...
It has to be destroyed later.
When it's repaid, the loan isn't there. So we have a crazy system that we haven't got money, which is real, which actually is independent. We've got a loan. And when the loan is repaid, the money literally is dead. It disappears.
But here's the thing, Richard. As an educationalist, the money now is the most important thing in our society. Everything is about financial assets. I go around the wealthy areas near where I live. I'm not in the wealthy area, but I go to the wealthy areas near where I live, and it is all investment bankers. It is all venture capitalists. It's the people that are interested in money. But that simple detail of how money is created, young people are not taught that. They don't understand it. And in fact, even you are surprised, and you're the educator.
I know.
And you haven't been taught this. And therefore, what we need to realise is these people, these commercial banks, they can do whatever they like. Literally, they are literally creating money. And that money is important to society, but we let these people do whatever they like. Now, what we're told is it's all QE, it's all the state, and therefore they want to distract us from actually realising, no, it isn't. It's the commercial banks that are actually creating this money by lending it into existence.
But now that comes on to the whole thing about young people being forced in a certain direction, because all of this leads towards, effectively, we're all servants, we're all worshipping the banking sector. Everything from the minute you arrive in school, you're being told, be a robot and the banking sector will look after everything else. That's where the connection between education and money comes in. And the reality is, what sits behind this? The desire to enrich a small number of people sits behind it. Because of course, what Philip is saying is, yes, the £10,000 is created and the £10,000 is destroyed, but the interest on the £10,000 is very much alive and is very much kept by a small number of people.
And it's important to understand, you probably don't know this, Richard, but in fact, what do they lend? What do they use that money for? And this is shocking, but this is what it is. Something like 45% is used to create money to buy commercial and residential property. That's what it's there for. What do you think that does? In other words, you're literally creating money which enables people to pay more and more for houses. What do you think that does to the price of houses?
They go up.
And they go up and up and up and up, which is what we've seen. And what do you think it does to the kids that you're talking about? The guy on the debate, I can't buy a house. So we think we're almost brainwashed into thinking inflation of a house is good. No, it isn't. It's actually damaging the people that haven't got
And
wealth.
what happens is you've still got the same house your dad would have had, but it now costs twice the amount. But the critical point here is this, and young people are being pushed into this all the time. The interest payments become much higher because the loan is much bigger. Therefore, the bank makes more money. And it just goes round and round in circles. And what worries me is this, more than anything else. Every single young person I talk to is obsessed with two things, money and fame. Yeah. Right, to the extent of standing half naked on a social media site in order to get little thumbs up clicks and whatever. And I just worry with all of this that we've got young people chasing the wrong dream.
And again, I think that comes from a distraction and the way that we're gearing this model to young people. And one of the big challenges within education is to help young people understand the way they're being manipulated outside of education, right?
Can I just finish the 4 categories of investment?
Oh, sorry, I do
to
apologise.
clarify. So one is real estate, which creates asset price inflation, which means you're literally pouring money into the hands of people with assets, with houses. The second bit is financial assets, which is this VC world, which is the derivative world, the casino banking, which is again pouring money into those with financial assets and not into the people that need it. The third use of the money is for consumption, to pay more, and that means the consumer goods go up in price. And that is actually 85% of money created by these organizations that are literally doing it without any supervision, goes to create inflation, which steals value and from the young kids. That's why what you're seeing from the young kids is happening. Only 10 to 15% actually is finding meaningful jobs, creating goods and services that we need. That's a small amount, and that is the problem. So we're getting inflation, which is a crime against mankind. Inflation is, and what's worse, which shocked me.
Why is inflation so damaging, by the way?
Because it means poor people can't get their assets. It means that you're pouring money into the people who have assets, whether it be property, house, financial assets. You're literally pouring money, and that is
at the expense of the poor.
At the expense of the poor. Therefore, you get massive inequality, and it means that you get that the 1% have everything, and the 99% have absolutely nothing. And on top of it, which is the evil which troubles me most, is we look at inflation and we say, well, we got inflation which is crushing people, and we then say, the conventional economic answer is increase interest rates. Yeah. What does that do? It imposes more suffering because they can't even pay their mortgage. So not only have they got cost of living increase on food, they suddenly have to pay a mortgage. And that's why you get the woman on the debate saying, I can't make it work. And therefore, until we address the money and the debt model, which is accumulating continuously, which is accumulating prices, we are stuffed. And therefore, we have to start to educate people, Richard, on what money is and what debt is. And that's what I'd like to start to do maybe in the next section, to look at the Bible. The Bible has the answer to this. Now, before you turn off and say, 1 minute, what's this? Thank God, I'm a successful businessman. I've got a lot of businesses that are game-changing with a partner, Gary Cropford. I've had businesses that turn over 1.2 billion, employing 100,000 people. I'm no mug. But the Bible has the answers. Richard is a world-class educator. What I'd like to do in the next section is to go through a verse. Use your skills. You're an educator. You've taught me how to educate. I want to see what is God actually doing in this piece. How is he? What is the solution? This section, which actually deals with the manna journey, which is starting to explain why we call it the manna journey. The answer is, as crazy as it sounds, in the manna narrative. And what we're trying to do is change the narrative, which is what you're saying. Let's think about how that might work.
And just to remind viewers that part of this project is to say that there are answers in traditional wisdom, the Bible, or whatever you want to call it. And we just have to connect the dots. We just have to understand what the messages are and relate them to modern society.
Correct. And this is to people of faith, to people who have no faith, when they see the wisdom of this, we actually show them in practice, your experience and contextual, which I always think of in education. If we can show people, as Richard did in the schools, there is another model. You were doing it with these businesses with a social purpose. I'm sure you were talking about an environment. You must have been focusing on both within a system. Yeah. The Bible knows that. And I want to go through this story.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start. So the story is in, let me find it, in Exodus chapter 16. Now, the first bit, which is interesting, is it starts by the Israelites say, we want to go back to Egypt. What do you think they say? They want to go back to Egypt. Why do you think, Richard, they want to go back to Egypt?
Because it's where they feel safe at home. There's resource. There's everything they feel they need to lead a happy life.
Isn't there something called the Stockholm syndrome? That once you're enslaved, you almost love your master, even though you become a robot. You actually get addicted into the system.
Without doubt. I mean, there are black people who fought for the Confederates in the American Civil War, voluntarily, which is an extraordinary thought. They fought to retain slavery, they were the slaves.
So it's clearly addressing the problem that we are living in a society that we accept has enslaved almost all the population. Do we accept that as a principle? Are we effectively slaves to our jobs, to our mortgages?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So this is completely... So that's the context of what we're supposed to do. Now, this is, to me, these two verses are game-changing, and I want to see if we can unpack what the verses are actually saying. So this is chapter 16, verse 4. And so God says to Moses, I'm going to cause it to rain food from the sky. And this is it. The people will go out and they'll gather the quota for the day on the day. So what that means is people's needs are being met every single day. What does that say to you, Richard? What does that conjure in your mind, the fact that needs are being met every day?
It says that you don't need to worry about being safe and your needs being catered for. You won't go hungry, so take that off your tick list of concerns.
Because you can trust the system.
Yeah.
So, and do we have a system that works meeting people's needs every day, or do we have a system that doesn't meet people's needs every day?
What we are doing is the precise opposite. Rather than giving people the structure and the security and the safety of what the Bible's recommended, we're doing the opposite. We're creating the Wild West in order to enrich a small number of people.
Yes, and what's fascinating is the word that it uses, devayom biomo, which is a daily quota. Now, I want to take you back. This is the second time in Exodus it's used. Let me tell you the first time it's used. This is in chapter 5, where it says, so the Israelites are producing bricks, production line, they're producing bricks. They go and ask Pharaoh for 3 days of holiday, festivity in the wilderness. Pharaoh says, you lazy people, why are you talking about me letting go of you? Not only are you going to have to produce the bricks yourself, you're going to have to produce the same quantity, but you're going to have to gather your own straw. Now, so that's what the king says. Then his taskmasters use this phrase, and the taskmaster, this is chapter 5, verse 13. They say, finish your work, devar yom b'yom, finish your daily quota. So you've got the same daily quota, but this time not that your needs are being met every day, but you have to produce a certain number of bricks for the king. And not only that, it's impossible because you're now having to gather your own straw, and therefore the task is impossible. What do you think that's going to do to society, Richard, if you're having to produce the same daily quota, the same GDP, or the same profit, but with you gathering? Does that relate to the world that we live in, by the way, for a start?
Well, it certainly does within the world of education, because what we're saying to kids from a very early age is, here's what you need to gather. You need to get these qualifications. You need to pass these tests. You need to work ridiculously hard in order to tick those boxes. And the child says, well, what do I get at the end of it? And they say, well, the reward is you could possibly go to university. And then the child says, well, what happens at university? Well, you study for 3 years. What then? Then you get to take more tests, right? So your reward for ticking the box is to keep gathering more and more and more. And then you get to a point where you're a young person. You may be saddled in obscene levels of debt, but you might have 3 or 4 letters after your name. And the young person says, so what now? Well, now you're going to transfer that exact same model into a working life. So
absolutely right.
For me, what that's all about is actually saying we are going to disenfranchise you, and you are going to spend your life disenfranchised. The power is not in your hands. And we teach children that from the time they start formal education through to the day they die.
So the king, this behind closed doors, says, make it impossible for them. But he doesn't talk about the daily quota. That comes from his taskmasters. They say, without blaming it on the king, they say, 1 minute, no, you've got to produce the same GDP, the same profit, and impossible. So the person really is putting the strings behind the scenes. What then happens in verse 19 is that the Israelite foremen are beaten up by the taskmasters because they can't produce what's impossible. The taskmasters go, the Israelites go to the king, say, 1 minute, you're beating us up, we can't do it because it's impossible. The Pharaoh ignores them, the king ignores them completely, and then they start to say to Israelites, because they're being beaten up, now you've got to do this impossible task because we're in trouble, because we're being beaten up. And what do you think that does? It completely creates bad faith, because when you start from the top with an impossible target and you force it down from a king who is behind closed doors, and that's enforced by taskmasters and then by effectively capos, by foremen, society breaks down. And because people have been forced to do the impossible. So that's the experience of a daily quota. A quota, which is in our world, is GDP, but an impossible level of GDP or profit. And that...
But even down to just the most simple level, and I don't want to single anybody out, so I won't, but there are well-known businessmen who in their warehouses and in their production lines will say, what we need is stretch targets, which means effectively we're going to say, you are either above or below average. Well, of course, the rule of average is that someone's always above and below. And consequently, what happens is the people who are below average are really castigated. And it's just to go, and they sit there and they say, well, that's gained us an extra 5% efficiency. Let's get another 5%.
This is the old pick rate in the warehouses that we used to deal with. The pick rate is the same. It doesn't take into account your age. If you're walking 18 miles a shift, you can do that when you're young, 18 to 25, whatever. But when you're older, you can't do it. But because it's all about profit, growth, GDP growth, and ignores what you said you were teaching your kids to do from that early age, many, many years ago, people and planet.
Yep.
It makes the old people can't put food on the table because they can't do enough picking, and they end up struggling because of their age.
And sorry, it resonates so powerfully with the education model, right? Because what we're constantly being told as an education professional is you need to get more kids above average. Well, I don't want to say anything, but those people telling us to do that clearly don't understand basic maths, because the average shifts, right? So we've got, and then what happens is you have children labelled on very narrow and thin grounds going, oh, I'm above average, a little percentage. And then the middle group, majority going, well, I'm average. And then you've got a group underneath going, I'm below average. That means my whole life is already mapped out for me, and my whole life is mapped out at being below average.
And that was